Welcome to the GridML training videos. In this video, I'm going to show you step by step how to use GridML to view and search the MISMO ILAD schema. So to get started, we're going to bring up the browser and we're going to type in gridml.com. And before we go into the actual viewing and searching, I want to show you the resources tab on the GridML website. It has 3 articles related to ILAD. One is a general introduction, the other one goes into details on the worksheet, and the other one has details about the schema file itself, which you can read through any of these. I recommend it. But first I wanted to show you a diagram here, and for those of you who saw the how to load the ILAD schema into GridML, you've already seen this diagram, and it's useful to go through for what we're going to show today. ILAD schema is based on MISMO 3.4, but it includes extensions from ULAD, DU, LPA, and the Fannie Mae flat file, and those are kind of discussed here in this overview. And the reason that's important is because that's the way that data is organized also within the schema. So let's go straight to the schema file so we can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to click the user sign in, which logs me into GridML, and then it loads up any active schemas that I have, and I have the ILAD schema is the only active schema in GridML right now, and this is what we had downloaded it from MISMO in an earlier exercise. So it's ready to view and search. But to go back to the previous point on the different data sets that are data set extensions that are included, if we go to the search button, one of the data sets that was whose extensions were included were those for ULAD. If I type in ULAD and then colon, the colon is the schema language that tells me that what's before it is what's called a namespace, and all a namespace is that it identifies who does the data belong to. In this case, the data was extended by the ULAD. The Fannie Freddie folks were requested that those be added in. So when I type in ULAD, GridML will show a list of all the ULAD specific data that's in here. It says that there's 38 items that were found, 9 containers, 16 data points, and 13 types, and those are all listed here. GridML allows you to uncheck these boxes so you can view, in this case, only the 9 containers, asset detail extension, URLA total extension, and so on. If we uncheck that, check data points, these are the specific data points that ULAD has included in. We can go back up here, erase that out. We can type in DU colon, and now we can see that there's 32 results for here, 10 data points, 10 containers. These are the 10 containers. If I uncheck those, we can uncheck that and check the data points. Those are the data points that DU included. We can do the same thing for LPA colon, and here it shows the 18 containers, data points, and 1 attribute. Here's the container names. These are the data points that LPA added in. And we can do the same thing for ILAD. ILAD is the name of the schema, but it's also the name of the MISMO workgroup, and the MISMO workgroup representing ILAD added in 12 containers and 24 data points. Some of these are from the Fannie Mae flat file. We can take data points like, for example, property foreclosure count is a DU 3.2 flat file data point that was added in by the ILAD group. It's a data point that was not part of MISMO 3.4, wasn't part of the ULAD extensions, it wasn't part of DU, the DU or LPA extensions. It was added in by the ILAD group because it was requested by the lender communities that belong to that work group. So that's a little bit about this is a feature, this type of searching. I'm not aware of this. It's typically not in XML editors or those types of tools. It's something that GridML is specifically has a handy feature for schemas like ILAD. If we go to View, we can see it brings up the deal element, which is a MISMO element, and these are typical things. There's another video that goes into detail about the features that are available in viewing and searching. I'm kind of here highlighting ones that are specific and unique to schemas like ILAD that contain a lot of other data sets within it. Like, for example, if we go to loan, we see the typical containers. Here's construction, and here's the typical MISMO data elements within that. But if we go down to extension and click on that, we can see there are MISMO extensions and other. Let's go to other, and we can see that here's a DU construction extension container, and we can see it has the DU : namespace prefix in front of it, so that identifies it specifically as being for DU. If we click on that and look at its contents, there's a DU land value amount type, and here's its DU definition. And since it's an enumerated type, it also has shows the enumerated values for it. So that's one of the things that the view mode allows you to see, not only the MISMO data, but you can also view the DU, ULAD, or ILAD extension data when you're viewing also. So one of the things I wanted to do next is one of the typical exercises that people, when they're using ILAD, typically they're mapping either ILAD data into their own internal data formats, or they're mapping from their internal data formats into ILAD. So I'm going to show, and typically one of the exercises that data analysts or business analysts will go through is identifying the ILAD data and its matching data to their internal format. So I've created a worksheet here that has, on the left hand side, it has 3 columns for ILAD data and 3 columns for a fictional lender company called Acme Lending. And with their internal, they've created their own internal format that's XML. It's based on MISMO, but is a smaller subset of MISMO because it has only the MISMO data that Acme needs, that they've included in their own internal format. Plus it has additional data that's Acme specific that is not part of MISMO. So it's their own internal exchange format. And there's also a schema for that. So let's load up that schema into GridML. I'm going to go to Setup. When I click Setup, it loads my repository data that from the GridML servers that it stores there. Here I have a repository called MISMO 3.x schemas, and that's where I put the ILAD schema, MISMO 3.5, the draft for MISMO 3.6, and the ULDD schema. But in my default repository, if I click on that, I have a schema called Acme XML, and here are the root elements that are available for that. I'm going to pick Acme XML, which is the main root element, and it's already in my repository, so now I can go straight to View or Search. Let's go to View and take a look at what's in that. As I mentioned, this schema is based on MISMO. Here's the 2 tabs now, one for the ILAD schema, and here's the one for Acme XML. Acme XML is the root of that internal data format that they use. They have a loan file element, which is slightly different than MISMO. If we click on that, here are the contents of that. We can see that there's a borrower element, and which is slightly different than how MISMO does it. They also have a loan element. And if we click on loan, we can see there's a loan detail element. But notice that in there, when I click on loan detail, it shows the properties, it shows their definition. Notice that they, in their loan detail element, they've combined not just what's in the, that they use from the MISMO loan detail element, but they've also combined data from the MISMO affordable lending, amortization rule, buy down occurrence, anything that's a single occurrence container. In other words, it only occurs once within the loan. They've included all that detail in their loan detail element, whereas in MISMO, that data is divided up into a bunch of different containers. I'm just showing you this, just showing you that, you know, that this is the thing that companies will typically do. They'll make their own version of MISMO that's specific to them, but it still uses the MISMO data point names where possible. And of course, where they have their own containers or their own data elements, they will use their own names if they're not part of MISMO. So one of the typical functions that a business analyst may do, like I mentioned before, is have a worksheet showing the relationship or the mappings between ILAD data and their internal formats. So let's go through that exercise. We'll pick a few. We're going to go back here and let's search for, I know one of the data elements that's in both formats is PACE. Loan payoff amount. So under the deal element, I found a match here. It's called, and it's in the DU namespace, or it's part of the DU extensions, the DU PACE loan payoff amount. And I'm in the deal element tab, so I'm going to select under loan, and it found the match directly under loan, loan detail, extension, other, and it's in the DU loan detail extension container and the PACE loan payoff amount. In my worksheet, I want to paste in the XPath for the container that the data element is located in. So I'm going to say copy the full XPath. So it's going to grab this XPath from here, which is built from this path that it followed here from the deal element. I'm going to go into the XPath here. I'm going to click on the cell. I'm going to right click on that and hit paste. And there it's pasted the extension. Notice that it includes the DU namespace prefix for the container. Now let's go back and get the actual data element. I also want to paste this definition in here since it's in the cell next to it. So GridML allows you to do that. If you click on the include definition checkbox and then say copy name. Now when I go into here and I click on data element and I right click and select paste, it pasted the name and the definition to it. Now let's do the same thing for Acme XML. I've already done the search. Acme XML already has it in there, except for Acme XML, when we click on that, we see it's in this path under their root element. So let's pick the container and say copy the XPath, which is already down here. So I'm going to go back to the worksheet. I'm going to right click, select paste. It pasted the XPath for the container that it's in. Let's go back and get the data element name and its definition. So I want to include the definition, but only the name, not the full path. I go back to my worksheet, click on the data element cell, right click, paste, and it pasted the name and the definition. Notice the Acme definition, they started off using the ILAD definition from the DU extension, but they added a note into their definition that says used for Fannie Mae DU product, not included in MISMO 3.5 and earlier. So that's a note that they've included in theirs. Now let's go look for a different data element. I want to grab the data element for front end ratio, and notice it's not finding it, and because that's not the actual data element that's named for that, but there's a checkbox here that says include definitions in search. Let's see what happens when we do that. And now notice it found a match under deal and it found a match under Acme XML, and that's because when I click on this, it found, here's the term front-end ratio, but it's included in a definition for housing expense ratio percent. And it says it's the ratio of the proposed monthly housing expenses to the qualifying income of the borrowers as per lender or investor guidelines, aka also known as front-end ratio. So this is an additional feature of GridML that sometimes you can, in the search here, if you don't find it by the name you think it is, you can say include definitions and you may find a match in this case for something that's in the industry it's commonly known as front-end ratio, but the MISMO name for it is housing expense ratio percent. So it found a match under Acme XML. It also found a match in the deal element of ILAD with the same definition, because when Acme built its schema, it included the MISMO definition in its definition, which is a good practice to do. So let's go back to our worksheet. But first, let's grab the container that it's in. It's in the MISMO qualification container. So here's the XPath for that. I do not want to include the definition for the container. So I'm going to say copy XPath. I'm going to go in here, click on the cell in the XPath column, right click and paste. And now I'm going to go grab the container definition. Here's the container, or the element name definition. I'm going to say include definition, copy the element name, go back to my worksheet, click on the cell, right click, and then paste. And then we'll do the same thing for Acme. Here's the element name. We'll click on the arrow. Here's the path where it's located. I want the container name in this case. So I don't want the definition. I'm going to say copy full XPath. Go back to my worksheet, right click, hit paste. Do the same thing real quickly for the element name. I'm going to say include the definition, copy the name. It's copying the name that is highlighted in blue. Go back to my worksheet, right click, paste, and it pastes in the name of the definition. Notice in this case both definitions are identical. The ILAD definition has this, the Acme definition is that. So that in a nutshell is a quick view of looking at viewing and searching with schemas like ILAD that contain multiple data sets or extensions within them. And in this video I've highlighted some of the features that are specific to GridML, highlighting some of the features that allow you to view and search using GridML in ways that you can't search with like a regular XML editor, and also showing you how you would use it in a typical scenario where you're pasting this data into either an iGuide or a table that's in a mapping worksheet. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video and was informative for you. Thank you.